When you think of a Land Rover, the ultra-expensive and uber-luxurious Range Rover quickly comes to mind. However, back in 2012, Land Rover actually introduced a baby member of the Range Rover family called the Evoque. It was kind of an instant hit for Land Rover due to its attractive combination of a sleek design and the typical Land Rover off-road capabilities. And back in 2020, we saw Land Rover introduce an all-new second-generation version, really kind of tweaking and updating all of the pluses that we liked from the first generation Evoque. Now for 2024, Land Rover is giving the Evoque its kind of first round of updates, and you can see they're pretty mild ones, from tweaked sheet metal at the front and a brand new infotainment system inside with their latest Pivi Pro software with an 11.4-inch display. So as you can see this week, Land Rover has dropped off the latest Range Rover Evoque, a 2025 P250 in the SE trim. And the big question I want answered, for those of you who are interested in getting into the Range Rover family, but you don't necessarily want to spend well over $100,000, how does the latest version of the Range Rover Evoque stack up? Stay tuned to find out. Now, before we start talking about the exterior styling changes, the minor ones that Land Rover made to this vehicle last year, I thought I'd pop the hood and remind you guys what's powering this thing. Now, unlike its bigger brothers, which offer a choice between an inline-6 or a V8, this model sadly only comes with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, and Land Rover used to offer 2 different tunes. However, they discontinued that back in 2023, so now all you get is the P250 tune. And as you can see underneath this hood, you're going to find a transverse mounted engine. It's a 2-liter gasoline direct injection turbocharged 4-cylinder, part of their Ingenium engine family. And they call it the P250 because it basically has 250 PS horsepower, the metric horsepower. But here in the US, power output continues to be 246 horsepower and 269 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers are pretty much on par with a lot of its competitors from BMW, Mercedes, and Audi, of course. It all goes out through a 9-speed ZF-sourced automatic, and the company's latest all-wheel drive system with their terrain management, or their terrain response system, is going to be included as well, especially if you guys go for this SE dynamic trim. Now, fuel economy is rated at 20 in the city and 27 on the highway. That is on premium gas. That is among the low end of the segment. It has a 17.7 gallon fuel tank. You're looking at around 350 to 380-ish miles of range on a full tank. Land Rover says the 0 to 60 time for this vehicle should be around the 7-second mark, with a top speed of around 143 miles an hour. And even though this is the baby Range Rover, it can actually still tow a pretty decent amount, just under 4,000 pounds, if you can believe it. That's actually among the best in the segment. So if you need to tow and you want something small, you're going to want to go for this vehicle. And as this car sits, it weighs in at just under 4,000 pounds. Sadly, if you guys are looking for a hybrid or a mild hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or diesel, it's just not offered here in the US like it is in other markets. But let's go ahead and close up the hood here and talk about the exterior styling. Now, as you can see, this vehicle is instantly recognizable as a Range Rover. In fact, it pretty much just looks like a concept car. When this vehicle first debuted, this design language debuted in 2007, it really turned a lot of heads, and the first generation basically looked like the concept. So it's no surprise to me that Land Rover would want to keep the second generation pretty evolutionary. This color is called Arios Gray. I'm probably mispronouncing it. You can see it's kind of like that trendy flat gray, that ceramic silver color that we've seen, or the Audi Nardo gray. You can see the headlights did get a slight facelift this year. They kind of remind us of what we saw on the Range Rover Velar. The grille also got some tweaking. It boldly spells out Range Rover at the front with that tweaked grille and the subtle Land Rover badge to the side. I also really like the kind of rose gold or kind of copper accents that you see around the vehicle, along the hood as well. That kind of tries to look like a hood vent, but it's definitely a fake vent. The front bumper also looks really stylish with some functional air intake openings along the front and along the side as well. You do have some fog lights down here, along with their full LED headlights with LED daytime running lights and turn signals as well. And overall, this car is definitely one of the most stylish vehicles in the class because, as you guys know, it actually competes with vehicles like the BMW X1, the Mercedes-Benz GLB, the Audi Q3, and the Lexus UX, and also there's the upcoming Acura ADX. Now, moving around the side profile, the Evoque definitely looks small. It actually looks pretty short and stubby, and that's because it is. This vehicle has a 105-inch long wheelbase with a 173.2-inch overall length. It actually is only about an inch longer than the first generation, and this vehicle is around 5 inches shorter than a BMW X5, so this is a pretty small vehicle. The Velar is around 12 inches longer than this vehicle, and then the Big Daddy Range Rover can go well over 200 inches. Now you can see the wheels. These are the optional 19-inch black finish wheels that my test car has. It's riding on a 235 by 55 R19 tire. You have big disc brakes with a 4-wheel independent suspension. No air suspension on this vehicle, but Land Rover says you have around 8.3 inches of ground clearance, which is a pretty decent amount. I like the fact that Land Rover doesn't put any kind of excessive cladding along the side of the vehicle. It just kind of has that clean, full paint finish. This kind of trim piece here is also interesting as well, with the kind of rose gold accents, the copper accents. You can see the black roof is also optional. My test car also has a panoramic sunroof that also opens up to vent air. I also like the way this looks over here. It also has those pop-out door handles. You can see how it has kind of like this clean line along the windowsill, which definitely gives it a more concept car look. Backing away from the vehicle, you can see this is still very much an attractive vehicle for me. It just looks very short. Obviously, if you need something larger, get the Velar for an extra foot of overall length, but this is a great vehicle if you guys live in an urban environment, and again, you want to have that Range Rover look. You can see the taillights are very slim. They are a full LED design with an LED turn signal, LED reverse lights, of course. It boldly spells out Range Rover in the back again with a little subtle Evoque badge. You can see there's also a nice tasteful spoiler over here with the third brake light, and then you also have a digital camera rearview mirror that's kind of mounted in the shark fin antenna, along with the rear wiper that's kind of tucked away underneath the spoiler. No visible exhaust tips, but the rear bumper again is very clean. It's very elegant. And I think this car's design has really aged well, so it didn't really need too many visual changes. Now, being that this is so small, you do have to deal with the kind of tight cargo area. You only get around 21 cubic feet of storage space with the back seats up. You can see there's a little bit of storage to the side over there. If you look underneath the floor over here, as you can see, there is a temporary spare tire, which is important if you guys plan to do some off-roading. If you want to fold down those seats, you do have to do it from the rear seat area. It expands the cargo to just over 50 cubic feet of space. 50 cubic feet is fine, but it is going to be up to 10 cubic feet smaller versus some of its rivals. There's also a little power outlet back here. It looks like a 12 volt, but I don't see like a standard household outlet. But overall, as you can see, the back seat area is a little bit on the tighter side. Now moving on to the interior of this 2025 Range Rover Evoque. Before we get inside, however, here's the key fob for the vehicle. You can see this is their latest intelligent access key. It's a really sturdy and hefty and heavy feeling key. You can see it has your usual buttons here for lock, unlock, power liftgate, and panic function. The key, again, is a pretty nice looking key, and you just kind of have to get used to the size. This vehicle does have the retractable door handles, as you guys saw, and it also has a walkaway approach lock and unlock feature. As you can see, I have the key fob on me. As I approach the vehicle, the door handles pop out, and then it basically unlocks the door for you and unfolds the mirrors, which is definitely a nice touch. You can turn that on and off if you guys prefer. As you can see, my test car has the ebony black leather interior. As you can see, these seats, they adjust, I believe, in 14 different ways. They are heated, but not ventilated, which kind of annoyed me a little bit, the fact that they weren't cooled seats. But as you can see, the seats, they look pretty bland, if I'm being honest. But I will say that the seats themselves, they are nicely padded. They are pretty comfortable. The leather material also feels pretty decent. It has a really nice looking steering wheel. And then you can see the door panel. I just personally wouldn't get a black interior because it just looks really like dark in here and a little bland. But you can see this upper portion is a soft touch injection molded plastic. You have some leather and leather covering over here. I believe this is actually a faux leather covering it. You have lots of piano black plastic here with the aluminum accented door handles, nice high quality window controls. You have 2-person memory seats, and down here it is slightly padded, which is nice, and additional storage. My test car also has the upgraded Meridian sound system, which sounds pretty decent. If you guys are an audiophile, I would highly suggest adding that option for it. But once you get inside, you can see with 8.3 inches of ground clearance, it has a pretty easy step in height, which, you know, is what people expect in a small SUV like this. Now, getting in and shutting the door has a nice solid sounding thunk. This vehicle actually shares a platform with the Jaguar E-Pace. The E-Pace actually came out first, and then Land Rover followed it up with their new Evoque back in 2020, so about 2 years later. Now, starting the vehicle up, you can see start-stop button here is where you'd expect it to be. It's actually really nicely visible behind the steering wheel even. And you can hear the engine has a traditional starter noise, and that's because this is not a mild hybrid. That's the traditional Land Rover chime as well. My test car, part of the technology package, adds that heads-up display, which is nice. The steering wheel also looks pretty good with the Range Rover badge. I don't love the piano black, but I do love this kind of dark chrome look here that you'll find along the steering wheel and along the dashboard. There's also a heated steering wheel, which is nice. Land Rover also has their adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist. It works okay. It's not the best in the segment. And then in terms of the materials, you can see the upper portion of the dash is a soft touch injection molded plastic. There's more of that faux leather right here where it's nice and extra padded. And then you can see here, this is the newest 11.4-inch Pivi Pro infotainment system, which includes wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It is a slightly different screen versus when this generation first debuted in 2020, where it was kind of more integrated into the dash. This is now floating and it's a little bit of a bigger display. The steering wheel also includes a power tilt and telescoping mechanism, which is located here on the driver's side. That's very much a lot of Land Rover and Jaguars do that. I also am impressed by the metal paddle shifters here to control the 9-speed auto, which is nice. You have your traditional Windows stock controls. You have an all-digital 12.3-inch cluster where you can customize that slightly, although not like as good as what you're going to find in an Audi or a BMW, for example, or a Mercedes. This infotainment software, you can see there's the GPS that's kind of built in. It's not super impressive in terms of the graphics behind it. The CarPlay does look decent. You kind of have to go into that little area there to go and access a lot of your different sources and widgets where you can adjust a couple of things. You can even pull up vehicle dimensions. That's kind of interesting that Land Rover is the only one that really does that, although it shows it to you in Imperial instead of the what the US actually looks at it in. So that's something that kind of annoys me. You can see your heated seat is over here, but again, no cooled seats. And then your climate control functions, you can see, are located in the screen. Land Rover instead just tries to go very minimalistic. You can see there's 3 levels of heated seats. There's dual zone temperature control, which is nice. But there's not even a volume knob here on the outside, which kind of annoys me. You kind of have to scroll this on the screen to use the volume, or use the little wheel here to do the volume, which again, I don't prefer that. I would just prefer to have like a little knob somewhere in here. There's clearly some space for it. There's your climate if I want to adjust the climate there. Again, don't love how I kind of have to adjust it here in the screen. It takes a little bit of getting used to. There's lots of piano black plastic here. There's kind of this like gray plastic area here. You can see, open it up. You have one USB-C charging port. You have a wireless phone charging pad there, although my phone never charged when I laid it on there every time, so I found that to be kind of annoying. Perhaps it was also my case, but my phone charges in every other vehicle even though it's through its case, so keep that in mind. This shifter, this controls the 9-speed auto. There's a little trigger here at the front. You push that, and then you push forward to go into reverse. As you can see, you have a full top-down 360 camera with trajectory. It also has rear cross-traffic braking. There's also like a 3D view if you guys need to do a perimeter scan around the vehicle. You can see the graphics and quality is good though. So this is where Land Rover really improved their infotainment software. It's just the processing speeds need to be faster. I found it to be laggy and slow at times, so I didn't really appreciate that. But the CarPlay at least worked pretty nicely. You can see more piano black here, which shows scratches and fingerprints annoyingly. You have two decent sized cup holders here, which is also nice. You have an armrest here, which offers 2 individual storage areas. You can see there's another USB there if you want to plug in your phone via the wired connection for integration, which is nice. The seats, like I mentioned, the leather feels relatively soft and supple. It just doesn't really hold you in place. They're also really boring looking, but I wish at this price point Land Rover offered a ventilated seat. You can see glove compartment. It opens up in a bin style. It's damped and lined with felt. Offers a good amount of additional storage. My test car also has the digital camera rearview mirror, part of that technology package, which is good for letting in or allowing you to have more visibility. You can see there's a woven material for the headliner. You have LED map lighting in this interior as well right there. And you can see my test car also has the nice panoramic sunroof, which also opens up to basically vent or opens up completely, only over the 2 front seats, however. But it's nice that it actually opens up fully, and the fact that it is a panoramic sunroof. Like I said, there is also that retractable shade if you guys don't want to have the sun beating down on you. But overall, the interior, it isn't the most luxurious. It's also very drab. I would definitely go for the light gray interior color as opposed to this black. Overall build quality seems good. I didn't hear any squeaks and rattles, however, and the fit and finish seemed pretty solid. The technology looks good. It just needs better processing speeds to be quicker to respond. But overall, good visibility and comfortable seats. It's a relatively nice interior, especially when you're looking at this segment. But let's go ahead and hop into the back seat so I can show you guys what that space is like. As you can see, the door actually opens up a pretty decent amount if you guys need to fit a child seat back here. There's soft touch materials basically from the front carried over back here with lots of that piano black, even soft touch down here with additional storage, which is nice. These seats, like I said earlier, they do fold down to expand the cargo capacity, although look at this, guys. It doesn't actually fold down very flat. There's a noticeable hump here, so if you wanted to basically lay down a bed back here or put a bike, it could be a challenge, and I don't like how it doesn't fold completely flat, which I find to be a little bit inexcusable. These seats also don't recline or slide forward. And then when you get back here, you can see Land Rover basically says you have around 34 inches of legroom back here. 34 inches is not a lot, but it's also not the smallest in the class. The UX is definitely gonna have that. You can see once you're back here, this is pretty much my driving position. There's decent foot space underneath here. There is a hump for the middle passengers. You do have 3-level heated seats back here, which is nice. Part of that climate package, and then you can see there's rear seat air vents as well. No third climate zones, but you do have 2 storage cubbies here, which is good. And then you also have an armrest that folds down, gives you 2 cup holders. And then in terms of the headroom space, you can see it's actually not too bad because of the higher roofline of this vehicle, although it kind of looks like it has a lower roofline. So I'm surprised that I actually have a couple, like an extra inch or 2. There's this big little bar here that kind of intrudes on your actual view and visibility for the panoramic sunroof. But overall, this backseat area is usable. It just kind of reminds you that this is the smallest member of the Range Rover family, so get a bigger model if you guys need more backseat space. So here we are behind the wheel of the 2025 Land Rover Range Rover Evoque. That nameplate is just, or that name is just so incredibly long. Land Rover needs to find a way to shorten it somehow, although I don't really know how they're gonna do it. But believe it or not, in all my years of doing these videos, I actually haven't had a chance to review, drive, and do a full road test of the Range Rover Evoque. This nameplate has been around since 2012, and this is, again, the baby member of the Range Rover family. Land Rover technically has 2 baby SUVs. It's this model, and then there's the Discovery Sport. Technically, the Discovery Sport's about 9 inches longer, and it's also a little bit less expensive, like $1,000 less expensive. But it also offers a 3rd row, which is weird. This is the style leader, basically, in the Range Rover family, although all the Range Rovers are really, really stylish looking, but it's their subcompact, their smallest and most affordable way that you can get into a Range Rover. It comes standard with the P250 engine, a 2-liter turbo 4, making around 246 horsepower, hooked up to a 9-speed auto built by ZF with standard all-wheel drive. Let's go ahead and see what we can get 0 to 60 wise. It's in sport mode. We're gonna brake torque it. And we got 0 to 60 in 7.57 seconds on our first run. And that's on, again, perfectly level ground. That's where I do the primary 0 to 60 testing in all my videos when I'm back home. And that time is perfectly adequate. Although I will say that Land Rover used to offer a P300 version of this engine that had closer to 300 horsepower, about 50 more horsepower than this. That 0 to 60 time is okay. It's not the quickest in the segment, but it's also, I wouldn't say the slowest in the segment. The Lexus UX, I just tested the UX 300H, which was still actually a little bit quicker than this, if you can believe it, but it felt pretty similar to this car as well. So what I don't like about this engine is the sound of it. It's not the most good sounding engine. I don't think that's the way you can phrase it. It just doesn't sound very pleasant. And on that run, we got 8.5 seconds. That's with it more going slightly uphill. That's without doing any kind of brake torquing. And I also want to point out that the auto start stop in this car is hugely annoying. It's because this vehicle doesn't have any kind of 48-volt mild hybrid. So I found that it's super laggy when you have the start stop engaged. So you're gonna have to go into the screen to turn that off every single time pretty much, which is kind of annoying. The 9-speed auto built by ZF is also a little bit slow to shift. I'm not liking the way that the transmission feels. The spacing between the gear ratios also feels a little bit off. For 9 gears to choose from, I feel like the engine is kind of constantly falling out of the meat of its power band, which you really need to push the engine past 3,000 to feel the turbo kick in, where it does have the torque. Remember, it only has 269 pound-feet. The last BMW X1 that I tested was just significantly more peppy than this, and even the Lexus, the UX hybrid, feels peppier because of the electric motor. There's just not that lag between the engine and the transmission, and it also, you know, the engine sound in the BMW is just much better. And keep in mind, this vehicle is considerably more expensive. Now, the handling dynamics of this Range Rover Evoque are actually pretty decent. You have an all-independent suspension. It is tuned more for the road, although my test car is riding on a 19-inch wheel. You can go up to a 21. It's definitely not the sporty-ish driving vehicle, but it feels competent. It weighs just under 4,000 pounds, so you do feel that weight a little bit, but it certainly holds its own. The Range Rover Evoque definitely is the most nimble version of the Range Rover. Put my foot down here. Again, there's a noticeable like delay once it shifts, and then you almost have to wait like a split second for the turbo and the power to kind of go back there, and then it starts to accelerate you forward again. So not loving the powertrain combination. I never got a chance to drive the P300 version of this engine that offered nearly 300 horsepower, but this powertrain, it should be okay for most until you start driving some of the rivals. And some of them have considerably less power. But ride quality, what I will say, is very good in this car. I mean, we are driving a model with the 19-inch wheels, the all-independent suspension. This vehicle has 8.3 inches of ground clearance. The suspension itself is tuned more for the road, but Land Rover, being that it is a Land Rover, it does have the ability to go off-road, and it has probably the most off-road capability that you're gonna find in this segment. Put my foot down here. You can feel the all-wheel drive system try to rotate the car to push it around that corner. And that was just basically like half throttle, and it feels relatively peppy there. It's only when you start pushing the engine in this car where you start to notice the weaknesses of this powertrain. But I mean, most of the times you're basically just gonna drive it in drive. You're gonna have the drive mode selector, which, by the way, I hate how it's in the screen here. I've had it in auto. There's no sport mode. Most of the times you're just gonna have it in comfort mode here. The infotainment system, while it looks nice, the software behind it is a little bit slow and laggy, so I don't love that. Visibility from the driver's seat is pretty good, actually, out of the front, the side. The rear is also pretty good. And if you guys prefer something with better visibility, my test car also has that option for the digital camera rearview mirror, which I love. And this vehicle, aside from the engine that makes a little bit of unpleasant sounds, it actually, is pretty quiet in here. I don't hear much in terms of road or wind noise, just that engine noise when you really push it. But when you don't push it, it feels fine. Like I said earlier, the ride quality is surprisingly good, and I didn't really notice a single squeak or rattle in this car. So that's kind of the other concern with Land Rovers, is how's the build quality. And surprisingly, my test car, with 6,000 miles on it, it rides really well, and it also feels solidly made. So that's a nice plus. The seats are also really comfortable. The seats are probably one of the most boring looking seats that I've ever seen in a luxury car, but at least the padding and cushioning feels supportive, yet it also is plush. I took this car on an hour-and-a-half long road trip, and I didn't feel any kind of like soreness in my body when I was sitting in these seats for a good amount of time. In terms of the fuel efficiency, it is among the lowest in the segment at 20 in the city, 27 on the highway. You have roughly around 380-ish miles of range on a full tank, courtesy of that 17-ish gallon fuel tank. In my week's worth of testing, I averaged around 19 in the city, in pure city driving. On the highway, the best I was able to do was around 25 mpg, so just short of the EPA's 27. In mixed driving, you'll probably do around 22 mpg-ish, depending again on your driving conditions and how you drive, if you're a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more conservative. But overall, if you drive this car at like 7/10, it's a nice driving SUV with a good ride quality. It feels solidly made. It gives you a good commanding view of the road. The driver assistance in this car is behind the times. I mostly found the lane keep assist to be annoying, and it just kind of nudges you back and vibrates the wheel constantly. At least it doesn't beep most of the times. The blind spot monitoring does, however, beep furiously if you guys have somebody in your blind spot and you kind of change lanes, although I found it to be a little bit too sensitive at times, so perhaps you can kind of tailor back the sensitivity on there. But overall, Land Rover in general, Jaguar Land Rover especially, isn't doing the best that it could be doing. Obviously, the Defender and the Range Rover products help save it. The baby Range Rover Evoque, I kind of had higher expectations for it. It is still a pleasant driving SUV, but considering the high price tag of this car, I just don't think that Land Rover is offering enough besides the style and the extra capability to kind of justify its much higher price tag versus a lot of its rivals. Now, with just over 3,700 units sold in America last year, clearly the Range Rover Evoque is not a strong seller for Land Rover. In fact, there was a time where the company was doing between 10 to 15,000 units. I mean, really in the subcompact premium luxury SUV space, the best seller is the Volvo XC40, doing just under 30,000 units a year. The BMW X1 does around 22,000 units. So clearly, Land Rover has some work to do. In fact, in this class of vehicle, I think this is actually my favorite looking SUV SUV. It just really captures the Range Rover design language in a smaller, more manageable package, especially if you guys are looking for something like an urban SUV that can still go off-road, that delivers an excellent ride quality, that has a decent engine. As you guys saw, 0 to 60 happens in around 7.5 seconds, which is fine, but the fuel economy really lags, and that's where the hybrid-only Lexus UX is just significantly better. But the Range Rover Evoque, I would say people wouldn't really cross-shop the Lexus with this vehicle. It kind of just stands in its own in the segment. It also looks a lot bigger than it actually is until you actually see it in person. In photos, it feels like a much larger vehicle, but it's actually among the smallest subcompact SUVs you're gonna find in the segment. The back seat is certainly usable, if a little bit tight. The cargo area is also usable, but again, it's not the biggest in the class. Handling dynamics, this definitely leans toward comfort, but it's also one of the sportiest driving Range Rovers, although if you guys are looking at the Range Rover Sport, that actually is a really excellent driving SUV. In fact, overall, I am genuinely impressed with this vehicle as my first time driving and reviewing it for you guys. The powertrain needs work, the transmission needs work, the infotainment software needs work, and really what kind of holds this car back from being a top seller is the really high price tag, because if you want to get your hands on this vehicle, the base version is going to start at around $49,500. That's a solid $10,000 more versus a lot of its rivals. Even the BMW X1 is almost 10 grand less. A Lexus UX is around like 12 grand less, so that's a pretty big chunk of change. If you want to go to the Dynamic SE trim that adds a couple of features on this trim that you may enjoy, it's going to start around $5,000 higher at around 55 grand with options that my test car has here. The sticker balloons to just over 61 grand. That's right, 61 grand for this vehicle is grossly expensive. Again, it's around $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive versus even the European rivals. So until Land Rover really offers something here to kind of give you that special feel, I mean, yes, the design is special, but it doesn't drive that much special, and I think that's where the problem is. It also gets among the worst fuel economy in the segment. So I'm looking forward to Land Rover introducing a hybrid powertrain, a plug-in hybrid powertrain. They offer it in Europe, but it's not coming to the States here. And they also need to really update the software behind the Pivi Pro infotainment system, because while it does look good, it was just infuriating to use because it was really slow and laggy at times, especially when you first start the vehicle up. But again, if you can kind of look past all that, you're okay with the higher price tag, and you must have the Range Rover design and badge, this vehicle could certainly still be worth a look. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2025 Land Rover Range Rover Evoque. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.